go. Welcome to the Teens Armory podcast. We have the goal to help young Christians today to grow in their faith and knowledge. In this episode, we'll be talking about the subject of racism. I'm Chris. I'm here with Hayden. How's it going, Hayden? Happy New Year. Good to see you.
Happy New Year, man. Yeah, we
Yeah,
were recording this on the 1st of January. It's awesome.
yeah, and I can say I officially haven't spoken with you since last year.
Dude, real. Yeah, real. I haven't spoken since with you since last year. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
crazy.
it's
Yeah,
crazy.
man. Dude, I just got back from the hugest trip like recently.
Oh yeah. Tell us a little about that. Tell us
Yeah.
about London and about
Yes.
Berlin or
Oh, we didn't go to Berlin. That would have been cool to go see. But no, we went to the United Kingdom and we took a train to France. Me and a lot of my family. Big family reunion trip. And then we all flew back to the States. And I'll say it was really cool. We got to see a lot of really cool things. I think the coolest thing we got to see were a lot of the churches over there. They have some very beautiful historic churches. We got to go to Westminster Church in the UK. Beautiful church. We drove past, I think, St. Peter's Cathedral. Don't quote me on that, but I think we drove past it. Some of my family went back to go see it. Two beautiful churches. And then we got to go see Notre Dame in France. It was around the time. No, it's not around time. We got that was still being built. I think it's almost done. I don't know. I couldn't really tell where the damage was besides the top spire from where it got burnt. But
yeah.
yeah. I think I was thinking a lot while in the UK especially. But like this country is a very historically Christian country. Like it has a lot of really, deep historic ties to Christianity, and yet it's so anti-Christian now, which I think is very sad because it has a lot of historic churches in. My family attended an Evensong, which is like it's like it's nighttime worship is the best way I can describe it. It's a very at Westminster is an Anglican church, and my cousin Cooper, who's been on the podcast, he's an Anglican, and yeah, so but no, it
Oh
was
yeah.
you could really like see the tradition, but you could also see that church has been hijacked by progressivism. It's not as bad as it could have been, but it's just that the main theme was man centered, and there was also
Right.
woman reverend. I think they're called reverend. I'm not an Anglican. I'm not an Anglican, so I don't know what they're called. But yeah, I talked to Cooper about it a little bit. He's like, yeah, it's not really what most Anglican churches are like the one he goes to. So yeah, I was very sad because a lot of their country is no longer as Christian as it used to be. They have a lot of historic ties, and the Christians that do exist, a lot of them are very progressive. So yeah, I'd say be praying for the United Kingdom and Europe in general. France is doing really good, I think. France is very Catholic. I noticed that walking around France is very Catholic, and I think they're doing very good. But they've still lost a lot of their they've still fallen out of Christianity too. But the United Kingdom is the most prevalent that I've noticed because yeah, just talking to people, you can really notice that they don't
Yeah.
really care about the historic ties and all that. So yeah,
That's really sad.
yeah,
Um, it's funny how you mentioned how we're growing so anti-Christian, and yet at the same time, we're also one of the most depressed, we're one of the most suicidal, we're one of the
yeah, I
least
know.
happy generations ever. And it makes you wonder if there's a connection at all in there. I wonder if this has to do with anything at all with how we're trying to go completely against what our country was founded upon. So yeah,
Yeah,
you're definitely right. We need to definitely be praying for these people in other
yeah,
parts of the world where things are less and less Christian, um,
hmm
and things are looking pretty dark for them.
yeah, yeah. But on a more lighter note, this upcoming week of January is gonna be a very big week for me because in a few days I will be getting baptized. So
Let's
yes, that will be
go.
happening. I know it's something a long time coming, but I think that now is the proper time. I've done a lot of praying. I've finally written my testimony. That took way too long. It's kind of hard to think of the theological differences between me then and me now, but I think I managed to find it. And yeah, I talked to members and the congregation and my elders, and yeah, I'm gonna be baptized soon. And then a few days after that, school starts, and then a few days after that, it's my birthday. So yeah, was a big week.
Oh, big week.
Real big week, man. So yeah, that's the only things I had to talk about. What you got, Chris?
Oh yeah. I don't know. I'm doing well. I also had to wake up quite early today, considering it's New Year's. You know, you were like, "Hey, you gotta wake up. You gotta wake up to record the podcast tomorrow." And
Yeah.
I was thinking, it's New Year's, right?
Yeah. Yeah. It's just that we got some people coming over early. That's why.
Oh
So
yeah, yeah. I gotta go somewhere too. So yeah, things are doing pretty well.
yeah.
Doing pretty well over here. Do a funny story about a family member who brought over Christmas, since Christmas happened while we were gone. There was someone left these habanero peppers, and they're like super spicy peppers. And then another family member thought it would be a good idea to eat them, thinking that they were either jalapeno or bell peppers or something. Anyway,
Mm.
let's just say he was in for a little bit of surprise finding that out. That's just a funny story I wanted to share with you. And speaking of funny, I believe we have a joke of the day.
We do have a joke of the day, Chris. You wanna see the joke of the day?
Yeah, yeah. Hey, and what's your favorite race?
Ooh, this is a hard one. I think I'm a big Kentucky Derby guy. What about you, Chris?
No, me personally, I like the Indianapolis 500.
Yeah,
That's where you
yeah,
can find like, there's they got the Hearts for the Lost guys up there too.
yeah.
So
That's true.
yeah, they do be
Uh,
evangelizing there
they
sometimes.
do be evangelizing there sometimes. Hey, listen,
But
listener, what did you think we were gonna say? What did you think we were gonna say? Hmm. Mm-hmm.
hmm,
Yeah. Hmm. They're probably a bunch of Daytona 500 people, if I'm
they
being
probably are.
honest.
They probably are.
Yeah, they probably are.
All right. So it's the joke is somewhat unrelated because well, they're not connected, but at least it has the same word in it, race. So
Yeah.
yeah, we're gonna be talking about the subject of quote racism. And we'll talk a little bit about it. Is it sinful? How does it work in today's culture? We'll talk a little bit about the ideas of critical race theory and a little bit about the history of Christianity and how people accuse it of being racist and stuff. And just lightly go over those things, not too deep of a dive, but we'll still cover the basics.
Yeah.
So Hayden, I got a question for you. Is racism sinful?
Yeah. I think this is an interesting question because I've been thinking about it a lot, and I don't think that what's it called? I think racism, like all sins, has its roots in a more prevalent sin mentioned in the Bible. I think that's why Scripture is so great, is because all the sins tie into one kind of thing, and the root of all those sins, by the way, is idolatry. This is talked about a lot in Romans. Idolatry is the root of quite a lot of sins, and it is what really separates us from God. So I wanted to go ahead and kind of, before we talk about racism, we should, see what is man, right? Because man is the object of racism. So let's see what is man. So we're hopping into Genesis 1:26 through 27, which says, Then God said, Let us make man in our own image, after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the flesh, oh my gosh, the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the heavens, and over the livestock, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps on the earth. So God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created them. Male and female, he created them. So that verse, really doesn't say that, God created this race and this race and this race. God made man, okay,
Right.
in his image. Man is equal in his image, okay? We are all of the same image. If you can take away physical appearance and we all have the same organs, flesh and bone, right?
Right, right.
So, yeah, I think racism kind of falls into two separate sins. I think that for one, the main sin is pride. We've talked about pride before on this podcast. We talked about how dangerous of a sin it is, and I think that there's that idea, especially racism, in what during the Civil War period. There was a big emphasis on that white is superior to black, and I think that comes from a lot of pride. And I think it's kind of sad that a lot of the churches in the South would use the one verse, "Slaves obey your masters," to really push slavery. I think that's kind of sad, but then again, right? What man intended for evil, God intended for good, and in the end, God's good was done. And now a lot of the southern churches are very, very Christian and very faithful. So yeah, but I think there's a big pride problem. Uh, and we've already talked about pride. I just have a verse on, you know, God doesn't call us to pride. In Philippians 2:3-8, he actually calls us to something differently. Paul says in Philippians 2:8, oh sorry, 2:3-8. So if there is any encouragement in Christ, any comfort from love, oh, that's the wrong verse. Do nothing from selfish ambition or conceit, but in humility count others more significant than yourselves. Let each of you not look not only to his own interests, but also to the interests of others, having this mind among yourself, which is yours in Jesus Christ, who, though he was in the form of God, did not count equally with God a thing to be grasped, but emptied himself by taking the form of a servant, being born in the likeness of men, and being formed into human form, he humbled himself by becoming obedient to the point of death, even death on a cross. So, as we can see, racism really derives itself from pride, and pride is obviously not something we are called to pursue. It's a very dangerous sin. I talked about that in our most recent episode. Um, and there is no reason to be prideful because we are being prideful for something that isn't even true. All men come from are equal. They're all made in the image of God, right? Um, yeah. I think the form that racism really takes today, especially in the online community, is in crude joking. There are a lot of very racist jokes, and racist is a buzzword. And if you've been on the internet, you probably know what I mean by a lot of racist jokes. Racism is a big buzzword today, which really lost its meaning. But
Right.
one can only look on a memes compilation. You do find like 50 uh, racist jokes, and by that I mean jokes that poke fun at a certain stereotype of a certain people based on their skin colors or something they do in their culture. And I don't think this is not uplifting to that culture or anything. In fact, it is more of mocking them. I don't think that's something we should pursue. Uh, there's a Bible verse I talked about this, Ephesians 5:4, which says, "Let there be no filthiness, nor foolish talk, nor crude joking, which are out of place, but instead let there be thanksgiving." So, to answer your question, is racism sinful? I think after studying the roots of said racism, that being pride and crude joking, I'd say yes, it is sinful, and we should turn away from stereotyping a particular people because we are all created equal. Or sorry, we are all made in the image of God, and to joke on the people is to joke on how God has created us, I think.
Yeah,
So yeah,
that's right. That's
I'll let you
true.
take it. I'll let you take it from there. I'm gonna go get a glass of water before I cough my head off.
Oh yeah, yeah, probably a good idea. So, is racism sinful? I would say first off, we need to define racism. As Hayden said, it has become quite a buzzword today, and it's lost a lot of meaning. So we need to find a proper way to use the term racism um, before I can fully explain if it's sinful or not. So by racism, we have a tendency to mean the mistreating of one ethnic background, culture, skin color, etc., or mockery of them based on the premise of that ethnic background, skin color, or culture. And now, if we were to take that form of racism, then we shall see that that is indeed a sin. It is a sin of showing favor to one group over another. And some would say that's human nature. Um, but I would say that's sinful nature. There are verses out there that greatly connect to this. And one story that reminds me of this is Galatians 2:11. To Galatians 2:11 through 14, it says, "But when Cephas came to Antioch, I opposed him to his face because he stood condemned. For before, certain men came from James. He was eating with the Gentiles. But when they came, he drew back and separated himself, fearing the circumcision party. And the rest of the Jews acted hypocritically along with him, so that even Barnabas was led astray by their hypocrisy. When I saw that their conduct was not in step with the truth of the gospel, I said to Cephas before you all, if you, though a Jew, live like a Gentile and not a Jew, how can you force the Gentiles to live like Jews? And Paul had to oppose him because of the fact of his showing favor to one group over the other. And this is something that we can relate to the modern idea of racism because it's common for people to look at someone of the same skin tone, for example, and to say in their minds that this person is more like me, so I should act like them on the basis of their skin tone because you'd feel more welcomed. You feel more at home, and that's why you would like to do that. But if that leads you to causing to treat this ethnic background or culture or skin tone as greater than another, and you refuse the evangelism to others, and that is certainly a problem, and it's so much
Mm,
of a problem that Paul had to rebuke them for it.
yeah.
That's just one example of something similar happening in the scriptures because it's the same concept. There's different
Hmm.
groups, and you want to treat one group with a certain attention and favor that you wouldn't show to another group. It most definitely is a sinful thing to be racist to other ethnic backgrounds and such. And I would also say it's also a sin. It's also bad for us um, to be joking about racist jokes. Uh,
Hmm.
I would say one example of this is Ephesians 5:4, as Hayden mentioned, which tells us not to let any foolish or corrupting talk come out of our mouths. And this is most certainly foolish talk because it is unwise and it is rude to others, and it has no benefit in the end. So it is most certainly something to be looked down upon. And
Hmm.
we just don't be racist, guys. It's not good for you. You don't benefit anything. Maybe you might get a laugh out of your friends, but just don't be racist.
Yeah. I think it'd be wise to, before we go on to the next question, to kind of define what racism really is, because um
Were you
uh
gone when I said what it
question.
was?
Yeah, I think so.
Oh,
So we're just gonna cut this part out now.
oh yeah, yeah. We're gonna.
Definition. The one time I go get water, bro, and you like drop the heaviest lore. Okay. So we're just gonna cut this part
All
out.
right.
All right. Anyway, next question is, how has racism changed in our culture? And my question kind of relates more to how it has changed evangelism, because I think evangelism really does change with the culture, in a sense where if people, during COVID-19, if you couldn't go outside, okay, now you're evangelizing online, right? That's kind of an example I'm trying to use. But I think racism has really changed evangelism in the sense that um, I'll get to this point later, but like people will think that Christianity is a very white religion in a sense, very European religion. And I think, especially with trying to evangelize or talk to someone of a different race, it becomes a little complicated for you because they're gonna pull out, oh well, blah 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 blah. You're just saying this because you're this or you're this, and you're racist for only asking me, but not this other guy, kind of thing. Um, I myself am a, straight white Christian male.
Get
These are
out.
all, I know. These are all the big buzzwords to make, any liberal, secularist kind of quiver, shake. Oh, you're one of those. And I think that with racism, they'll immediately assume that a lot of the white people are these racists, oh, they think they're better than everybody else kind of thing. Well, actually, no, I do not think I'm better than everyone else. I think I am just as sinful as, this guy or that guy. I don't think our skin color decides our value to God. I don't think that's what really decides that,
True.
because in the end, we are made in his image, all of us, you know. One of us isn't, made in someone else's image, and then the other person's made in a different image, and oh, they're not made in God's image. No, everyone's made in God's image. I already did that verse. And I think that it's really changed our culture of evangelism, especially when talking to some of the other races. This is just from mostly of my experience of having biblical conversations with people, close friends sometimes, and other times random people that maybe I just kind of get hooked into. the friend group or something, I'll have these kind of
Yeah.
conversations. But
Yeah.
you know, there's a lot of ideas that they think that me trying to share my faith may be um, me thinking I'm better and they're not, and they need this. Wait, no, I think everyone should need this. You're just the one in front of me at this moment, like you're the one that God's put in front of me. I should evangelize to you, not just because of your skin color, but because God has put you in front of me. I think this is a big point that how racism has changed our culture. And there's a lot of other things that it's changed for sure. But I think Chris will do a better job at touching on those, and I can do a better job touching on these. So yeah, Chris, what are some other things that racism has changed in our culture you want to add on?
During this time, Chris was busy speaking so eloquently, so clearly, so precisely, it
Hello.
would stun the average listener. But of course, this whole time, he was on mute.
That's mad awkward.
Oh, oh, sorry,
Oh,
sorry. I was on mute the whole
he's
time.
back.
I was on mute the whole time.
Oh, I was like, where is bro?
All right. I'm
All
back.
right,
I'm back. So yeah,
all right.
racism has changed a lot historically. Um, racism hasn't always been exactly what it is, what we call it today. Uh, because especially here in America, we have this great mix of multiple different races, as you would say.
Mhm.
Um, and by that, we don't mean like actual different human races, because there's only one race, the human race, as Hayden said. God sees us all as being made in His image. No one is made more in His image than someone else. But there are different ethnicities, there are different cultures, and there are different skin tones, if you will, all in a one space that we call America.
Oh yeah.
And so here, um, experiencing different cultures, it may be seen as a good thing by some, especially people who like visiting older cultures. But some people also may see it as inferior in culture, which is similar historically, but not exactly the same, because um, racism hasn't always been oh a certain ethnic background is more superior than another in one way or another. Uh, the idea somewhat comes from when um, different classes had slightly different skin tones, because the ones who were the peasants would work outside and thus would have a darker skin tone, and the ones who were
Hmm.
um, royalty and the nobles would have a lighter skin tone for staying inside a lot. So, so yes, while the idea of quote racism might be somewhat new,
Hmm.
the idea of different cultures having a different favor for one another, that's not super new. It's been going on for a while, and it has been something that we have come a long way from. We've come a long way um, from accepting slavery as a good thing to have, where churches used to justify racism, but we still have come so far from that. We've come far from slavery. We've come far from um, what some people would call systemic racism, and we'll get to that even a little later as well. I would say racism has changed a lot. Um, the idea of it, how it's become such a buzzword lately, um,
Yeah.
and how, if you were to ask someone back, I don't know, maybe a few centuries ago, what racism was, they might have a completely different answer from someone you would ask today. So yeah, that's just crazy to think about.
Yeah. I also think that kind of like you said, it's not as bad as it was today. I still think, that well, I do believe, that man is inherently sinful and that man will always find new ways to sin. And I think racism is the same way in that there will be different forms of racism as we go along. But it's definitely not as bad as it used to be, where we were literally, using people of different skin colors as a currency and using them as labor that we didn't pay for. I think that was a terrible thing.
Right.
And the fact that churches, were able to find some like messed up biblical way to support that is crazy. But we've really moved away from that. And I think that's a really good thing that a lot of people who use the buzzword really don't really consider. They think it's just as bad as whenever, people of different skin color will be used as currency, which that's still a big thing. But yeah, there's just a little point I wanted to add on. If you have nothing else, I think we could move on. This ties well into your next question.
Yeah, I think you're right. It does tie well to the next question. What is the next question?
Yeah, so I think one of the main things that really, parallels the slave trade to modern day racism is CRT. So, Chris, what is CRT?
Ooh, CRT. That's a big one. CRT stands for critical race theory, and maybe you've heard of it. It's pretty big on its effect in the culture and its grip on the modern day thought is growing stronger as we speak. Um, Mostly because of how it got into our institutions, but we'll talk a little bit about that. So it was organized, critical race theory was officially organized in 1989, although it had roots earlier than that. And then critical race theorists believed that political liberalism wasn't enough to correct the injustice of American society. Basically, um, making equal rights wasn't good enough. Just the fact that you freed people of color isn't good enough. So they said that their reasoning is because its emphasis on the equitable treatment under the law, also known as color blindness. And they thought that made it incapable of recognizing um, only the most overt and obvious racist practices. And it said that the law can't. What they mean by this is laws that make equal opportunity really don't. They really aren't good enough. That's what critical race theory suggests. Um, and now, critical race theory is best defined by its tenets that are explained by Richard Delgado, who was one of the founders of CRT, and uh, Jean Stefanchik. Here are just a few of the core tenets. First of all, race is not biological, rather, it is a social construct, particularly used by white people to oppress people of color. That is what they believe. So, and second of all, they believe that race is not abnormal. Instead, it is systemic or built into the system. This is where you will hear the term systemic racism, the idea that America, by definition, is racist. Third, what critical race scholars call interest convergence or material determinism. Basically, that just means that whenever there's a legal advance for the people of color, it actually serves the interests of dominant white groups. So let's just look at this from a serious perspective. If they were to propose all this, um, the idea that racism is not abnormal, is it instead systemic, is a big issue right here, where I would find. So I would say that racism is not built into the system in a systemic way. They also say that any legal advances or setbacks for the people of color serve the interests of dominant white groups. I would say that's sort of a catch-22 situation. They make it so if if you don't do anything, then you're racist for not supporting uh supporting their agenda. But if you do something, you only do it because it's for the interest of your group. Um, so that gets them stuck in this situation. And that's how they trap you. They get you into this idea that either you're for CRT and you're for quote anti-racism, or you must be a racist and you must be a fascist and you must be in support of evil things. So let's just look at its effects. What effects does it have? Well, we can look to 2020 if we want to see some of the obvious ones. There was riots, there was looting, and violence by BLM, which is Black Lives Matter, a critical race inspired group. News headlines would justify this as quote fiery but mostly peaceful protests. Meanwhile, buildings were getting burned down, businesses were getting destroyed, and entire blocks were being
Mm-hmm.
upturned. And yet all this was justified in the name of anti-racism. And now this is not to say that that's the main issue. If it was just that, this theory caused riots or whatever, then it wouldn't be such a big concern. Those are just symptoms of something bigger. You see, critical race theory started off with its theorists. And what did its theorists do? They did what progressives do. They went to the education. And what happens when you get into the education? You get your thought into the elites. And what happens when you get your thought into the elites? You get your thought into everyday life. So once the elites have it, it goes into big companies, mega companies like Target, Coca-Cola, other such things. They start enforcing diversity, equity, inclusion laws that make standards, diversity, equity, and inclusion standards that favor people of color over, as Hayden would say, straight white Christian males. I'm Hispanic, by the way, so I get away from the white part somewhat.
Yeah.
And then they make their way into the churches, because what happens when you have the education that has been hijacked by secularists? You end up with people educated with that secularism and bringing it into the churches. And now this is where it affects us personally, because the churches are growing more and more in favor of critical race theory. This is quite a big thing, because what critical race theory does to these churches is it causes them to become um, more in favor of the critical race theory agenda. It causes them to believe in, quote, anti-racism, which really means showing favor to in the opposite direction. So the idea is, if the white people for hundreds of years could mistreat the black people, then it must be fair for the black people, if you will, to be treated with more favor to undo the evil of the white people. So the idea makes sense on paper, you would say. One group attacked another group, therefore the other group has a chance to retaliate. Makes sense, right? Except for you realize that people are not categorized as these groups. Instead, they are individuals, and the actions of individuals should not be punished onto their offspring. For example, if your father were to go out and to commit a crime, should you be held accountable for it if you had absolutely no say in it whatsoever? So the white people today had no say in the sins of white people in the past, because they just didn't exist in that time. Um, in the same way, they shouldn't be treated as if they were the ones who caused the sin. We should, of course, frown upon the sins that have been committed in the past, but that doesn't mean that we say, "Oh well, because of the sins of the past, that means therefore we must be continued to show this disadvantage today for what we have done."
Hmm.
When in reality, they were just born. We were just all born into this world as individuals, not as groups of race or skin tone or groups of ethnicity. Those are simply things that tie in later. So let's get back to the idea of churches. Is how churches today end up preaching the gospel of Black Lives Matter, and what this causes people to do is it causes preachers in pulpits, and instead of preaching about the gospel, they end up preaching about social justice. Instead of preaching about Christ, they end up preaching about the Black Lives Matter agenda. Instead of preaching about how all are one in the gospel, on how we're all united together, they speak about how one group has oppressed another group for generations and must be looked down upon for what they have done.
Hmm.
And because of this is something that does not belong in our churches. It, as in the words of the Just Thinking podcast, they said this is a false gospel. It is not the true gospel, and it must not be treated as such. And since it has already started infiltrating our churches, we must pray. We must stand against it. And if you can, make your way into the education field. This is what happens when we lose our institutions. This is what happens when we lose um, our strongholds. Strong, good Bible believing Christians had a retreatist mindset that when things started to go wrong, they had to flee. And now fleeing persecution is not a bad thing. I don't think it's bad to flee persecution. I think it's bad to retreat whenever standing your ground is going to be the one that produces a more fruitful option. And we should keep
Mm.
standing our ground, even as churches fall, even as institutions fall into the hands of secular influences, into the hands of um, other progressive things. We need to stand we need to stand strong, because when we flee, we open the door to more opportunities, and we lose more and more ground, and we get closer and closer to true persecution among the Western world. So that's pretty much what I have to say. When I was doing research, actually, it's funny because a lot of the research I was using was in support of um, Black Lives Matter and CRT. So that was interesting. Anyway, that's pretty much what critical race theory is. Just brief, very brief. It deserves a whole episode, really. But I mean,
Yeah.
you know, and if you want to learn more, if you want to learn more about it, I strongly recommend the Just Thinking podcast.
Oh yeah.
They have an
Oh yeah.
absolutely excellent episode on it that covers pretty much everything, like from explaining what it
Mhm.
is to its history and the dark secrets behind it. And in case you're thinking it's some white oppressive podcast, no, these are black guys
No,
talking
no.
about it.
No, yeah.
They're very well aware, very well educated, and they explain it like 100 times better than I ever could. Hayden, you should go listen to that podcast.
Dude, I listened to like a bunch of episodes on the plane ride back from
You better
uh
have. You better have.
Europe. It was awesome, bro. It's a great podcast.
Anyway, apologize for for going on a bit of a rant. Let's talk about Hayden's question, because he's got a very good one. Hayden, I got a
Yeah.
question for you.
Shoot, what's your question? That's secretly my question.
Oh, is
Oh.
Christianity racist? Hmm.
Yeah. So this is kind of one that gets brought up a lot. I think that Christianity is a very white European religion, which isn't true at all. If you read the Bible, it tells you where, Paul went, where his missionary journeys were, and a lot of them were in the Middle East. So Christianity has its very historic roots and starting points around the Middle East, but it also has very historic points in Africa. There's actually a story where Philip meets the Ethiopian eunuch. I think is how you pronounce it, right? Eunuch.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And this is in Acts 8:26 through 40, which says, Now an angel of the Lord said to Philip, Rise and go towards the south, to the road that goes down from Jerusalem to Gaza. This is a desert place. And he rose and went. And there was an Ethiopian, a eunuch, a court official of Candace, queen of the Ethiopians, who was in charge of all her treasure. He came up to Jerusalem to worship, and he was returning, sitting in his chariot, and he was reading the prophet Isaiah. And the Spirit said to Philip, Go over and join this chariot. So Philip ran to him, and heard him reading Isaiah the prophet, and asked, Do you understand what you are reading? And he said, How can I, unless someone guides me? And he invited Philip to come up and sit with him. Now the passage now the passage of scripture that he was reading was this: Like a sheep, he was led to the slaughter; like a lamb before its shearer is silent, so he obeys not his mouth. So he opens not his mouth. In his humiliation, justice was denied him. Who can who can describe his generation? For his life is taken away from the earth. And the eunuch said to Philip, About whom, I ask, does the prophet say this? About himself or someone else? Then Philip opened his mouth, and beginning with the scripture, he told him the good news about Jesus. And as they were going along the road, they came to some water. And the eunuch said, See, here is water. What prevents me from being baptized? And he commanded the chariot to stop. And they both went down into the water, Philip and the eunuch, and he baptized him. And when they came up out of the water, the Spirit of the Lord carried Philip away, and the eunuch saw him no more, and went on his way rejoicing. But Philip found himself at Azotus, and as he passed through, preaching the gospel to all the towns until he reached Caesarea. So this is a very good story, by the way.
Mhm.
Probably one of my favorite stories in Acts because of how, gosh, it really shows God's providence and his plan, and the fact that he leads him over to this guy who's reading Isaiah and he's reading that specific verse. And that verse really produce a question. Who is he talking about? And that's such a great balancing board to talk about Jesus. Um, but to see here, I think one key important thing is that the eunuch had gone up to Jerusalem to worship and was reading the scriptures back. So this kind of leads into the idea that he was a Christian. So
Right.
assuming that, we could assume that there was a good, amount of Christianity already in Africa, which because it's really close to the Middle East, and also because of how many missionary journeys were sent out by the apostles in that area. So Christianity, before it was in Europe, was in Africa, in the Middle East, and even some parts of Asia. So yeah. Also, another point, this is from reformjournal.com. So these are some people who were from Africa, some great theologians. We have Cyprian and Teloturian. I probably butchered those names so bad, but they're both from Carthage, which is now modern day Tunisia. I definitely butchered that. I'm so sorry. Clement, Origen, Athanasius, and Cyril, which is like the most stacked amount of theologians, were all from Alexandria, Egypt. I can't believe that was they had all this from Egypt. That's
That's
crazy.
crazy.
I know. Egypt was pumping out theologians, I guess. And then St. Augustine of Hippo, the goat, was from modern day Algeria. So that's just insane how many of these great theologians came from Africa. And there were a lot more that came from, Asia and the Middle East and all these areas. So really, Christianity isn't racist, right? It's not a racist in the sense that it is a white specific religion or that it was, a European centered, though the Europeans really they really took it after what's it called? They took it on once they learned about it. The Europeans really spread it and it spread really quickly and was really central in Europe for a while. But it also was very central in Africa. It's a very historic in Africa
Right.
and in the Middle East and also in Asia, which Asia is one of the fastest growing Christian continents at the moment with some of those Christians in those continents.
Yeah. If I can
And sorry, in that continent.
if I can add something,
Yeah, go
it
ahead.
would be to quote, take a quote from Hearts of the Lost to answer, is Christianity racist? And then you would change it just a little bit. The scriptures were written in three different languages across three different continents, across how many different authors, and yet look how
Hmm.
uniting it is. Look
Yeah.
how united people are in the body of Christ from all different cultures and backgrounds, etc.
Hmm.
That's what I got reminded of when you said from Asia and Africa and other places. It's very
Yeah.
cool, very good to cool to learn this.
Hmm. Oh yeah, it's definitely very cool. I think that another point that is Christianity racist is like to the point what's it called? Do Christians only proclaim to a certain group or this group or that group? Because when you watch where we're sending out our missionaries, they are to a lot of specific areas in Africa and the Middle East and Asia. That's also because that's some of the areas where Christianity is hurting right now. Even in Europe, there are mission groups in Europe right now trying to bring back historic Christianity, and I think that that's definitely where Christianity is hurting a lot. It's even hurting here in America. There are a lot of different groups in America trying to bring back historic Christianity. So really, we are truly fulfilling what Mark 16:15 says. Go into all the world and proclaim the gospel to the whole creation. And to all, it says, in the all world, whole creation. And I think we are really doing that. I think, sure, some churches may send their mission groups to a certain area a lot, but maybe that's because that's the area they're best with. Maybe they know the language the best. Maybe they're working on translating the Bible. There are lots of different reasons. I don't think it's just because we think we're superior to a certain group. And maybe we live in America, right? So maybe it's not called a mission group, because we're not, maybe you consider a missionary someone who goes and leaves the country, but there are people who go around trying to bring back historic Christianity in America, where it is still hurting. It's hurting everywhere right now.
Right,
Christianity
right.
is hurting. Um, and there's a lot of reasons for this. We get to go into a whole episode about this, but um, just because we send certain groups to a certain place doesn't mean that it is racist. There are other reasons for why we're sending it, and in reality, we want to program to the whole creation. We want everyone to know, right? But we might only have the resources to go to one place, and if we have the ability to go to one place, perhaps God is really willing us to go. Like if you study a certain language and then you get the chance to go to that place, you're gonna go to that place, because you know the language. This is how God's plan for you works out. It's not something that we can manifest, right? If I, had the power to proclaim Christianity to the whole world, I'd love to do that. I'd love to be able to do that. And that's what I hope I'm doing with this podcast, right? I've been looking at where our outreach has been, and I'm really happy to, see people all over the world hearing this, hearing the truth. And I really am praying for, countries who are really hurting, especially Europe after visiting there.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's all I have. You got anything to add, Chris?
No, I think that you did good. That was I like the axe story, man. I don't think I've heard that one in a while. That was really good.
It's a good one,
But
bro. It's a great
it's
story.
funny because you said the eunuch went to Jerusalem to worship, and then I was thinking, see, the Bible conferences do exist, and yet they criticize us. See, we can do it too.
Real, yeah.
Not
Yeah.
sure if that's a serious argument, but I mean, maybe,
I mean, maybe.
maybe.
Maybe he didn't have a solid church in his country. Then again, he probably could start one, which I don't know. We don't really know too much. I think the focus of the story is on his conversion and how in God's providence did that. And I think it is a beautiful story, I will admit.
It is
A lot of the stories in Acts are very good.
indeed. I think that's pretty much all of what we're gonna cover today.
All
The
right.
subject of racism.
Yeah.
Let me steal Hayden's part. Thank you for listening. Thank you. I hope we didn't say anything too racist. I hope we're not white supremacists or whatever. Uh,
I mean, they'll probably think I am. If they think you are, that's a stretch. Yeah, there's a lot of gymnastics that I have to come with that.
yeah, a little bit. But then again, they could say, I don't know.
He's been converted. Hated's like, oh, he's
Oh
affecting
yeah,
him.
yeah.
Grr.
I've been converted. I've been infected. I've been whitewashed or
Yeah,
whatever.
yeah.
But yeah. Anyway, Hayden, you close out the episode if you're done.
All right. Yeah. Well, thank you for listening this far. As Chris said, hopefully this isn't be too racist. Uh, um, be sure to share the show or take out the knowledge and share it with people yourselves. That's probably the way we most recommend because they rather listen to you than two random guys on the internet. Got a few podcasts to shout out. We got Solacast, great podcast, great theology. Go check them out. We got Hearts for the Lost, a wonderful podcast on evangelism and a great ministry. Be sure to go check them out. Go to heartsforthelost.com. We, talked about a new podcast here. Just Thinking, another wonderful podcast. Go check them out. They have like 3 hour long episodes
Brilliant
that are just
stuff.
wonderful. Oh my gosh.
It's so awesome whenever they do actually drop because
I
they
know.
spend so much time on it that it's peak content.
It's so peak. Yeah, it's amazing, guys. Go check them out. We also got TTAYT, also known as Some Young Apologist on YouTube. Go check that out. Hopefully we'll be putting stuff on there eventually.
Hopefully.
I got some ideas. We could probably get some stuff done. Yeah. TTA merch. If you want to get some cool looking shirts with theology and a bunch of random stuff, I don't know what we put on there anymore, but it's great. Check it out. Link in the description. Until next time. Shoot, that's a different podcast. Why'd I just do? I
What
just did a different podcast
why
outro.
did you do
I did the I did my cousin Scooper
why did you do
podcast
the Cooper
outro.
thing?
I don't know. I was just listening to some episodes earlier, man. Okay, we gotta do the thing now. All ready? Shield of faith,
Yields up.
shields up.
That was really awesome.
That was super off, but you know what? Nothing editing can't fix,
Yeah, nothing editing
which
can't fix.
you're gonna be doing for a while. So
Yeah, let's go. What was I gonna say? I was gonna say something about it.
You lost the thought. You didn't put it at the end like the last time with my clip. I showed that to Cooper and he thought it was
Oh yeah,
hilarious.
yeah, right. I was gonna say something about fear mongering. I don't
Oh
I
yeah,
don't know what I was gonna say about fear mongering.
I
I just
don't
know I
know.
was gonna talk about it.
Now we just look like fear mongers, bro.
Yeah, we do look like fear mongers.
Yeah, we
Anyway,
look
don't
like
be
filmongers who just read Acts 8:26 through 40.
yeah, hopefully we don't get canceled by this.